this is the section on costs similar to R&D, and they just all, most of these are expensed as incurred. So you have the startup costs of a company, and in the past, like back in the 80s, those used to be capitalized and then as organization costs and then amortized, but they're not anymore and haven't been for a long time. Anyway, startup costs are expensed as incurred. So if you are starting a business, you have the articles of incorporation that has to be paid for, legal fees of drawing those up. You may have initial losses in the beginning of the company, a lot of startup costs of getting everything ready to go. And so basically, the logic of capitalizing them in the past was that, well, the company is not ready for its intended use, it's not ready to go yet, so these are sort of startup costs, and they get capitalized. But they thought about this and changed their mind on it some years later, and so now these are all expensed. And it's just based on the premise that it's too difficult to predict the future economic benefits associated with all of these expenditures, okay? So they're all expensed, startup costs expensed. Initial operating loss, also expensed as incurred. And the book goes into some explanation on this, but my basic take on it is that to capitalize a loss as an asset, it just doesn't make sense, you know? All right, that's my explanation. Advertising costs also are expensed as incurred, even though you've got, they give the example if you get some famous football player or something to advertise your products, they're going to do it for the next year. You got to expense it when the ad first appears because it's hard to measure the future economic benefit. However, you can capitalize blimps and billboards because they can be used in the future. What kinds of things lead to these being expensed? Back in the 1990s, AOL mailed out tons of little discs to everybody who had a personal computer at that point. And they were free, and the goal was to get as many people on AOL as possible, you know, because that would be good for them. But they also wanted to show profits because they were a startup at that point. And so they capitalized all the costs of mailing these discs out as customer acquisition costs with future economic benefit. Now, you could rationalize that, but the SEC didn't really go along with it. By 1996, a third of their assets were these customer acquisition costs, all these free discs they've mailed out to people. So the SEC ruled that AOL failed to demonstrate the ability to cover all these costs through future revenues, $3.5 million fine, restate the financial statements. And then this is just, AOL continued to grow, and at the time it used its overvalued stock to buy Time Warner in 2001, and it was referred to at the time of one company without assets buying another company without a clue. Well, they managed to get through all that. But at the time, Time Warner's balance sheet was called Goodwill Central. 128 billion of goodwill when total assets were 208 billion. And they also had other franchises, other intangible assets on the books. So anyway, those, when FASB decided that they had to attest for impairment, they ended up writing off a lot of that. Okay, computer software costs used to be in a lot more detail in this chapter, but now all we need to know is that upgrading your computer software is not an R&D expense, even though it may cost a lot of money, and it may involve some creativity, improving the computerized reservation system or developing a management information system, not R&D, okay? They're just regular expenses. Okay, so that kind of wraps up this chapter.